Welcome to the Learning Can't Wait podcast, a Full Mind production. At Full Mind, our vision is to ensure every child has access to an exceptional education. Each episode, we will be joined by pathfinders within and around the education space who are bringing about transformational change on behalf of deserving students. I am your host, Hayley Spira-Bauer. Welcome back, everybody, to the Learning Can't Wait podcast. I have someone special here today. Not only is she a repeat guest, but she is one of my favorite humans and someone who I'm lucky to call a friend, and I admire her. So welcome with me, Juliana Finnegan, the VP of Educator Experience at Vivi.
Thank you so much for having me. And you guys can't see me, but I'm like glowing because just being here with Hayley, we were actually texting this morning and saying, we get to hang out and it's for work.
I know, as if our attendance at conferences and all the other things we do isn't. But, you know, it's always so wonderful when work relationships turn into friendships. And so I appreciate a little bit of a blurred line. I'm not going to lie.
I love it. And I love our, walk and talks and everything in between. So I appreciate you and am constantly inspired by you and all of your work and this podcast. So
everybody's listening and they're like, are they just going to talk about how much they love each other today? And we could. Yeah. That could be a whole episode.
Absolutely.
But we'll save that. We'll save that for when I create the personal podcast, in the future. This one's the work one. So I'll get us back on track. Juliana, what have you been up to since you last appeared on the Learning Can't Wait podcast in its early days?
I know. I'm like trying to think back. I feel like it's been a million years and yesterday, kind of at the same time. So Vivi has been doing awesome. We actually expanded our Vivi Educator Council, which is our global group of Vivi users from Australia to the US, and they meet quarterly and they become honestly, really good friends of mine. They've helped us to really fine tune our product design and just fill my cup all the time. Also recently, beginning of what year is it? 2024. We just launched Vivi for Teachers, which is actually a free version of Vivi for teachers. It's a web-based app that allows students to join your quote unquote virtual classroom, and then they can wirelessly share their screen from anywhere in the classroom, obviously with the teacher still in full control. But we've seen some exciting uses of it because it's really giving students the ability to share their voice, share their work without the stress. Because you and I were both teachers for a while, and a lot of times it's the same students raising their hand every day because it's scary, especially post-COVID, to get in front of your friends, share your work, share your ideas, but now they can do it from their seats, feel really supported and secure, and also be able to build those collaborative muscles. And so it's been really exciting to see. And actually, fun thing, sorry, I'm still talking, just going forever. I actually was just stopped by my kids' school this morning, and one of the teachers who's been using it came up to me and he's like, I use it all the time. He's like, anytime I need my students to present, he teaches 5th grade. He's like, I pull out Vivi. He's like, I don't have to plug them in anymore. They don't have to email the links anymore. He's like, it's just so fast and you can control it through your phone.
So suffice to say, you've been very busy. So wait, I have a question, right? I am thinking of this from a business perspective. You're now offering Vivi for Teachers for free to educators. Why would a school want to buy the hardware as well? How does that change or amplify the experience?
Great question. So actually, so first off, the hardware they don't ever buy. It's kind of like a rental of sorts. So we are actually a SaaS model. So it's a subscription model for the real Vivi proper. Vivi for Teachers, though, very cool, is maybe 2% of what Vivi can do. So it allows students to wirelessly share their screens, but Vivi proper allows teachers to wirelessly share their screens. Up to 4 kids can share their screens. Ton of instructional tools, and that's on just the classroom side. And honestly, on the other side, it does digital signage, both for the classroom and the school. So we have some teachers or some districts who have dad jokes in the hallway during passing periods, or like fun quizzes that students can participate in, also virtual trophy cases. And we have emergency alerts, which has been a really impactful piece as well. Like our Vivi proper, you can attach it to TVs, projectors, IFPs, interactive flat panels, and it can actually power them up during an emergency. So the projector doesn't have to be on. So if fire drill goes off, it can turn on every single screen in your school and have a visual of how to get out of the school because it has the HDMI CEC. So it's like, it does morning announcements. We have El Segundo Unified, the principal of one of the elementary schools, turns on all the screens in the morning and does like live stream announcements in the morning and actually reads books on Fridays to this whole school.
The principals become a content creator.
Yes, 100%. And honestly, given that like human connection, right? Like now you're not just like, I'm sending you to the principal, but instead like I get to see you every morning and we're actually connecting. So Vivi proper has, all of those operational support. It's centrally managed. It can update. We like basically do updates almost quarterly and they can be done remotely over the weekend. Like it's really built for education. So it has all of these tools. So Vivi for Teachers is really like, we've never been able to offer something directly to teachers because you would have to set up your Vivi boxes in your school. And so this way teachers can try it out. They can get students sharing immediately and really start moving towards that student-driven learning that we know is so effective for kids.
That's really cool. And I love that you are getting feedback from people in your own district. And I'm sure you're getting a ton of feedback from other folks. There's a big question today about the place of technology in our schools and in our classrooms. You and I were talking right before we started recording. I feel like I talk about this writer a lot, but her name is Jessica Grose. She writes opinion pieces for the New York Times. She put out three sequential pieces on the 10th, 17th, and 24th of April. First one being called Get Tech Out of the Classroom Before It's Too Late. I got that article sent to me maybe 20 times from friend and professional networks. The next one was called Most Teachers Know They're Playing with Fire When They Use Tech in the Classroom. And the last one is Every Tech Tool in the Classroom Should Be Ruthlessly Evaluated. I feel like we need to get our mutual acquaintance, Carl Rectanis, to comment on that last one. But curious your thoughts before we get Carl's about these three pieces and just the general mindset that's permeating our society about technology today.
Well, I mean, this conversation about technology has been going on for a really long time. It's just been 100% amplified with COVID, right? So if you go back to 2011, 2012, maybe 2013, that's when like blended learning, quote unquote, and you guys can't see my little quote things, blended learning was starting, which was like, we were starting to see technology in the classroom. So we were seeing the station rotation model, we were seeing the lab model, we were seeing this flex model, right? And there's all these conversations about like, where can tech be used? What is beneficial? I mean, we've learned a lot since then of like, that lab model doesn't really work. That's very, very passive learning of just like sitting with a group of people all on technology at the same time and not necessarily being able to leverage it to personalize the needs for students, or how are we actually using it effectively? And the same conversation happened then as I see happening now, where it's like, it shouldn't be tech dependent. It should be tech enabled, like that learning. And so how are we actually leveraging technology to build teacher capacity and impact student learning in ways that we couldn't do it? And that does not take the human out of the equation at all. But it's like, how are we allowing students to leverage tech to create, to be collaborative, to build, to really push their learning to the next level? And I think that, unfortunately, tech can very easily be a passive learning experience, a babysitter, a glorified babysitter of sorts of like, okay, we're going to have you work on that while I'm doing this so that I know you're doing something, as opposed to building those muscles around actually how to use technology impactfully. And when we're looking at tech tools, making sure that those tools match the needs of our school, that match the needs of our students, our communities, and that we're using the tools to really support effective instruction. And so I think that a lot of times it's really easy to say, we just aren't going to use tech. But tech is here and it's here to stay. And we also want to make sure we're introducing it to our students at every age of, this isn't just something that you, like I always say, my kids are very engaged when watching a movie. They're almost drooling, to be totally honest. Like they're like, I don't know if your kids are the same way. I'm like, hello, hello, hello. Are you there? When they're watching a movie, they're gone.
Totally.
But you know what? And then I say the difference between engagement, we don't want just engagement. We want active engagement. And then when they're watching Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, they are like talking, they're identifying, they're like, I mean, that's not, our end goal, but that's kind of what I say the difference between that like engagement versus active engagement. And we also see this with the NETP, how they're mapping out, digital access. What does that look like? And really thinking through, how are we supporting educators with like robust professional development and learning around how to implement tech effectively? How are we making sure all of our students have access to the technology that does impact student learning, that can be leveraged in ways to personalize and support all of our students where they're at when they need it? And also help our teachers. Like that's what I talk about with Vivi. It's like, our teachers are working so hard. So how do we give them technology that can help to build their capacity to do what they do best, which is work with students and teach students? So
I'd be remiss if I didn't dovetail what you're sharing here with a lot of conversations we had both together and likely separately last week at ASU GSV and at the first of its kind AIR show, which was focused exclusively on AI. There were a lot of folks that had polarizing opinions about AI in schools. I think it's likely an extension of what you're naming here, right? Like tech enabled, AI enabled. We're not trying to replace the jobs of teachers with AI. I'm assuming that's not your vantage point, but like, please correct me if that's the rabbit hole you fell down.
I would like to not do that.
Cool. Thank you.
Would like take a strong stance there. But I do think, and I know I went back to like, 2012, but then we like fast forward to COVID, and all of a sudden something we've been pushing for so long was to get one-to-one devices in all of our schools happened with COVID. So now we have the devices, but like we're still struggling with how we use those devices. I think the similar thing is happening with AI, right? It's like we have the AI, but if you're just using it, just like we did with tech for a little bit, it's like as a bells and whistles, shiny, cool engagement piece, as opposed to something that is, I think we used the word in the podcast we did together, was like, how can it amplify your work? And, you are still, as the educator, the content expert. And so AI can be really helpful with, hey, I used an example. I was like, I need to think up a team name for my 6-year-old's soccer team. Like it's so little, but it's like, I just didn't have the mental capacity to think through all of the names that could be useful that were soccer related for a 5-year-old. Put it into ChatGPT. It was great, really quickly. That is something that just helped me to save some quick time. Same idea with using AI. Like, how can it help us to generate really like, really strong and rigorous questions around a piece of reading? And you're still going to be going through that instruction with your students. You're still going to be building that assessment. But how can we give you the tools to not just sit there and be like, I need to think through 10 questions to put on this assessment? But also make sure you're not just copying and pasting, right? You're actually reading through. You are still the holder of that content knowledge. You're still that expert. And so, but I do see a lot of tools, how are we leveraging these tools to support what we're doing and amplify?
When ChatGPT first came out, I was using it every single night to generate stories to read to my kid that had whatever topic or subject that he was interested in. So of course, with my son, gosh, love him, we were reading Star Wars stories about Legos with an 8-year-old boy who happened to share his name, which is Owen. Like it was so fun. And, at the time, everybody wanted to try out different use cases. And now we've seen a true evolution in how we're using these large language learning models to continue to build. And I think you're right. I think that what most commonly I heard while we were in ASU in San Diego, excuse me, I most commonly heard people that were like, smart people still need to operate the AI. It is really curious. I mean, there are tools popping up every single day. How do you think, as a society, we should be approaching the pending fiscal cliff and the development of new tools and the rapid proliferation? How do you balance those two things? There's a clampdown that's happening. This is a question somebody raised to me this morning. Our good friend Matt Miller actually raised it to me in preparation for an interview I'm doing upcoming. And I actually want to know what you would say about that.
I'm like, you know me, an internal processor. I'm sitting here. I'm like, okay, all of these. First off, I just want to say I'm totally doing your story hack on ChatGPT tonight because
yes,
I've never done that. It's incredible. I will say though, my girls, we read Rebel Girls every night. Like they get to have 3 Rebel Girls every night. So maybe we can add in some in there. But I love that idea because it's you've read the same things a million times by this point.
Or even like when they want you to tell them a story, they're like, Mom, tell me a story. And I'm like, I'm tapped out of generative ideas. Let me use some generative technology to help me tell some good stories here.
I think your kids have higher expectations for you than mine do.
Oh my goodness.
They don't for a story. They're like, not there.
Yeah. Well, there's a whole other episode we could have about my kids' expectations for me.
But I think that, yes, I think there's going to be a really big, I don't know what to call it, like tech audit of sorts in a lot of districts where you kind of say, okay, what do we have? What's working? I think there's a big push, as there has been a big push for a while, is like interactivity between everything. And how can we not just have like one thing for one specific piece? Because I think what we saw in COVID was like, we added a lot of Band-Aids really quick with technology, as opposed to one big Band-Aid that kind of helped to build cohesion across the board. So I think when we're looking at tech products, it's like, it can't just do one specific thing. How can it, and if it does one specific thing, how does it play nice with other things so that we are filling all of the gaps and needs for all of our districts? Because districts have a lot of similar challenges, but also very different challenges, and really making sure that the tech matches. And that's why I say matches the school, the teachers, the educators, the leaders, the students, and the community. So really making sure that there's buy-in across the board, and also within that audit, making sure that it resonates with everyone, all those stakeholders. I also think there's going to be a big push, and I don't mean to be like, pushing Vivi, but whatever, that's why I work. I think there needs to be a future proofing of some of our technology too, because we're also seeing a lot of things dying out after like 5 years is kind of the moment where things start, not working. And from both a green perspective of not having to throw out a ton of tech into like literally a landfill, but actually getting technology that's what I love about Vivi, is like, it's a little box that you essentially borrow, but it can be updated every quarter. It's never going to go bad. You're never going to have to get rid of it. So thinking through technology that is future-proofed in the way that it's going to support you now, but it can also support you in 2025 to 2035. So really thinking through, because I also hope that when we're looking at technology and we're looking at our funding, we're looking at not just now, but what do we want our districts to look like in 5-10 years? And how can we leverage technology to move that needle pedagogically as well? Like, we don't want teachers at the front of the classroom. We want teachers with their students. We know student-driven learning and small groups is like much more effective. We know, how do you build that growth mindset with our students in our classroom and like these types of rigorous learning experiences. And so I don't know if I answered your question completely.
Listen, but you did. And I think that there is a reckoning coming ahead of us. I also think, though, we've really blown the top off of what the future of education is going to look like. First, we did it because we had to. There was a pandemic. We had no choice. It was an emergency. And now we're really facing a reinvention of what students' future in school will look like. I think AI and the future careers that our students have are not even, we haven't even ideated them yet. One thing I appreciate about education is it's our job as educators. And specifically here, I say our job, and I'm not a classroom teacher anymore, but it's the job of classroom teachers and leaders to prepare students for a future of hopefully their choice, the direction of their choice. And I do think it's challenging when you consider that the world is going to be so different in 10 years due to the advent and rapid proliferation of AI than we all can even fathom.
Well, and I think like double underline, yes. And I think that's the hardest part too, is when we say school is going to look different and education is going to look different, but like the biggest difference is going to be what happens when you leave school and what the jobs look like there. And are we truly preparing our young people to, and our learners to be successful in that unknown? And so I think there's a lot of like, I love this, I'm a scientist teacher, backwards designing to do, right? Like, what could the future look like, and how do we enable schools, both K-12, pre-K, and IHEs, institutes of higher ed, to be thinking about the learning experiences they're going through, and how is that setting them up for success in that future world?
I can't wait.
Yeah.
Like, I am so excited because one, nothing I can do about it. The world's going to change whether I want it to or not. So I'm going to be excited about it because that's generally the take I have on life is if I can't control it, I have to find a way to be excited about it. I'm excited about it. And I'm excited for my own kids, like I imagine that the career they think they're going to have this moment is going to be a very different career by the time they're ready for it. Or yeah.
Well, and think about like the differences. I mean, so I think you're with me on, we're like kind of a zennial where we grew up very much without technology, but college was like my first email address. And I remember being like, so I have to check my grades on that? Okay. Like, I was like, I had a beeper, y'all. Like
a beeper. Bring back the beeper.
I mean, like I still remember calling my mom on a payphone and being like, you have a collect call from mom, soccer's done. Like, and that
we hacked that system, by the way.
We hacked that system. Don't tell anyone. I mean, I don't think it matters anymore because they don't exist really. But I mean, if you just even look in that short amount of time, the difference. And I think the big thing to remember is with this technology, with what we're setting them up for the future, is like getting the research. I think sometimes we get so lost in the, what is it going to be? But like, what is the research? Like in my old position at the Learning Accelerator, really, we did a ton of research on what is effective, engaging, and equitable learning for our students, and really like breaking down those key quality drivers. And like, that hasn't changed, right? Like it should be rigorous and relevant, actively engaging, socially connected, and growth oriented. Like all of those pieces are what we want to see in classrooms. So how can we build those in for our kids, leveraging technology that's already there in really impactful ways, and pointing to different instructional practices, say this is actually building that growth mindset, that like there's not one way to answer a question, that you can continually improve, that like the standards I mean, I could go off on that, but like standards aren't the end zone. It's like, okay, that base knowledge, you've got it. Now, how do you apply that knowledge? How do you create using that information? And so I think that like, if we get focused more on the research and what we know is good for kids, and then start building into it, like what is the tech stack that allows us to get there? What do we currently have in our schools, and how can we use that even better? And how do we get the data around how our students are using those pieces, how our teachers are using those pieces? And we're going to be able to work towards that in a more effective, aligned, and engaged way, right? So it's like, we can keep being like you said, you know, I have no control over it, so I'm going to be excited. It's like, but at the same time, we have control over mostly like we have like, you know, some control over like how we can, I'll use Dwayne's words, like do right by students. And so, and how can we get on the same page with that? And I think that's where like the NETP is really important. It's like, if you haven't read it, please read it. But, you know, using that research, using what we know about technology and education, and really trying to build these robust learning experiences for our students now so that they also see themselves as not only students, but learners and lifelong learners. And they want to keep learning. And so that's my feelings there. So a lot of times we just forget about the research. I'm like, I'm so passionate about the research, and not just research for student learning, but research for adult learning. And I can share with you the link of the research I did around that pre-COVID, which seemed random. It was effective asynchronous learning for adults. And then COVID happened. Everyone's like, so that research paper you did, can you send that to me? So,
well, we'll actually link all of these referenced articles and readings and research in the show notes of this episode on fullmindlearning.com/podcast. So if you're looking to find NETP or Jess Grose's writings or the piece that Juliana put together in her previous role, you will be able to find them very easily. Juliana, I could talk for days, but we know podcast listeners don't have that kind of attention span. So we'll just keep having you back. But I do have a question. You know, I'm going to tweak my typical final question, which is, what advice would you give a teacher starting their career today? I would give you a little twist on that because you've already answered that. And it is, what advice would you give a student graduating high school or college today?
Oh my God. As a like past high school teacher, I'm like, I'd say never stop learning, and also like follow your gut. And that's like such a weird, but I think the thing is post high school, post college for myself, at least, it was like, I felt like I was in a funnel that I was supposed to do one thing, right? And you and I are definitely examples of the fact that like, you never know the twists and turns that your life and your career can have. But I think we both have never stopped learning. Like every job I've done has helped me to be a better version of myself and helped me to learn and grow. And I followed my gut with like what fills my cup. And so I say gut because I want to say like follow my heart, but like that could be slightly cliche. But it's like you have that feeling where you're like, what is going to make you happy? And if you need help too, ask for help. I think that's the hardest thing too. I remember I look back at me at 22 and I was like, I can do this myself. And I was like so young and did not know what I was doing at all. And I think now at like almost 43, it's like, I am way more apt to say, hey, I'd love to pick your brain on this, or I need some help with this. And I think that that is something that we want to teach our learners at every step of the way, that it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to ask for help, because that's actually cyclically part of your learning experience as well. So, yeah, I think.
Period. That's like right there. Yes, asking for help is a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness.
It's all about the people that you have around you who are your go-to folks, your go-to thought partners, your person for support, your person when you need a hug. Like it's all about those people that you surround yourself with, and that vulnerability is okay. And I think that's a hard learning experience as well. So
Juliana Finnegan, you are such a dream. You're both brilliant, kind, generous, thoughtful. Thank you so much for coming back to the Learning Can't Wait podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. And also, I just realized I will give you the link also for Vivi for Teachers for any teachers who want to try it for free, or if you have friends, send it to them. We'd love to get more people in there and using their technology effectively.
Amazing.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always the best way to end my week, by the way.
I know. It's literally the best. And thank you to everybody who tuned in to this Love Fest / brilliant sharing of thoughts and ideas with Juliana Finnegan and the Learning Can't Wait podcast.
Thank you all. Thank you for having me again. I appreciate you.
Of course. Thanks for listening to the Learning Can't Wait podcast. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and share this episode. Be the first to know when we have a new episode by subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or have a suggestion for an episode, email us at podcast@fullmindlearning.com.